I thought part 3 was finally going to simplify Machiavelli for me. Instead, I think it made the whole thing harder. Because after part 2, I thought I had finally found the real issue. Maybe this was never really about fear versus love. Maybe it was about what a ruler can actually verify. Love is invisible. Loyalty is invisible. Trust is invisible. But obedience can be seen. And for a while, that felt like the strongest version of Machiavelli's argument. Not that fear is morally better, not that fear creates better people, but that fear gives a ruler something visible to rely on. That made more sense than I wanted it to. But then I started asking a different question. What problem was Machiavelli actually trying to solve? Because today, people pull him into almost every leadership conversation: business, parenting, politics, management, self-improvement. But was Machiavelli actually trying to answer all of those questions? I don't think he was. At least not directly. He wasn't asking, what's the healthiest way to lead people? He wasn't asking, how do you build a flourishing family? He wasn't asking, how do you build a company where people feel safe enough to innovate? He was asking something much harsher. How does a ruler survive when power itself is unstable? That changes the whole frame, because advice that might make sense in a collapsing political environment could be terrible advice inside a marriage, or a family, or a creative company. And for a moment, I thought that solved it. Maybe the question was never, was Machiavelli right? Maybe the question was, right for what? If you're optimizing for survival, fear might look practical. If you're optimizing for trust, fear might destroy the very thing you're trying to build. So maybe Machiavelli wasn't wrong. Maybe I'd simply been asking his answer to solve the wrong problem. But then something started bothering me, because that answer was almost too clean, and it actually conflicted with something I'd already discovered in part 2. In part 2, I realized uncertainty never disappears. It just moves. Even if a ruler relies on fear, he still needs soldiers to enforce it, officials to carry it out, advisors not to betray him, messengers to deliver orders. So even a system built on fear still depends on people, which means trust never completely leaves the picture. It just changes shape. And that's where my new answer started to crack. Because if uncertainty exists in every system, then maybe the difference between survival and flourishing isn't as clean as I wanted it to be. Maybe different situations really do call for different strategies. But maybe the underlying problem follows you everywhere. A ruler trying to survive a conspiracy, a founder trying to save a company, a parent trying to protect a child. They're obviously not the same situation, but they may all be wrestling with the same hidden problem. How do you depend on people when people can never be fully controlled? That was the crack, and once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Because now, right for what wasn't really an answer anymore. It created a better question. What happens when you're optimizing for more than one thing at the same time? A parent isn't only trying to keep a child safe. They're also trying to help that child become independent. A company isn't only trying to survive this quarter. It's also trying to build something people still want to work on 5 years from now. maybe the real problem isn't choosing between fear and love. And maybe it isn't even choosing between survival and flourishing. Maybe the real problem is that life keeps forcing us to pursue both at the same time. And those goals can pull against each other. That's where Machiavelli still bothers me, because I understand him better now than when I started. I understand why a ruler in an unstable world would care more about visible obedience than invisible loyalty. I understand why fear can seem more reliable than love. But I'm not sure survival can remain the highest goal forever without eventually damaging the very thing it was trying to protect. A strategy can help you survive a crisis. But what happens if you keep using it after the crisis is over? What happens when emergency logic becomes your normal way of thinking? What happens when fear keeps the kingdom intact, but slowly hollows out the people inside it? That's where I am now. I don't think Machiavelli was simply wrong. I think he may have been answering a much narrower question than we usually assume. But I also don't think that lets us dismiss him, because the same survival problem keeps showing up far outside Renaissance politics. And maybe that's why this quote has survived for so long. Not because fear is always better than love, but because the temptation to choose control over uncertainty never really goes away. So part 3 didn't give me the answer I expected. It gave me a harder question. Can you use survival logic without becoming ruled by it? Or maybe the real danger isn't Machiavelli at all. Maybe the real danger is that crisis can make Machiavelli sound right long after the crisis is over.